All right, good morning. How is everybody? Tired?
Yeah, we're a little broken.
It's November. So I always feel like November's a rough month. Like it's like we're getting close to the end of the semester. It goes fast too, right? Which always makes it feel a little overwhelming. Did everyone have a good Halloween? Yeah. Anyone else eat way too much candy? Oh my gosh. Oh, I have so much candy left. My kids have like this giant cauldron of candy in our living room, and we just had so much of it. I took a picture. I brought a picture to share with you. We all dressed up. Or four of us dressed up. My partner didn't, like, for shame, right? But we dressed up. It was really cute. Like, so my oldest Kaya was Sally from Nightmare Before Christmas, and my partner did all the face paint on her, which was really cool. And then Paisley was like a steampunk girl, and Emma was Wednesday. I think we counted 16 Wednesdays that came to our house. We are like, oh, apparently that, and like Mario and Barbie were so popular this year. A lot of Barbies this year. And then I was Indiana Jones. But so much candy. You can see we're in my tunnel. I made this really cool tunnel, and it all lights up, and it was very fun. And then I didn't realize that we had the day after Halloween off. So I spent like the whole day with three like sugar crashed children. It was miserable. So we took all the decorations down. I'm sorry to cancel class. I didn't realize they had the day off. Thankfully I realized it before it was that day, but I'm sorry that it affected us a little bit. So anyone do anything fun? Any stories or fun things to share about your Halloween adventure? That might be a dangerous thing to ask, but yeah. Hey,
I took a test on Halloween, because I had to take a test for Halloween, so because I went home. And then I, essentially just grabbed and then ate some of the Halloween candy. So my mom actually got me a decent amount of Halloween candy before Halloween, so I was able to, I did some of that and then still some of that left.
Oh, an exam on Halloween, that's the worst. I did that one year and I felt like the worst person in the world, so I never got it. Good. Anybody else? Anything fun? Yeah.
We bought a big bag of candy.
Yeah.
But only two people came.
Oh, okay.
Only two people came.
Did they get a lot of candy from you?
I didn't give them a lot because I didn't realize we have to make.
Sure.
Next year we're gonna get big candy bars for people. And I also.
And your address?
And trucks.
I'm just kidding. You did what?
And we had a big full candy and it sucked.
Okay.
Really badly for the next several days.
Yeah, it's tough. You never know how many people you're gonna get at your house. Like we bought a ton of candy, and because I decorate our house so much, we get a lot of people now. But it used to be like 3 or 4 people would come, and that would be it.
Then we cul-de-sac and don't decorate.
Yeah.
Which is that's the problem.
Right. Yeah. If you decorate, more people come. I've learned that over time, right? Yeah. But anybody else? Any other Halloween things? Right. It's November now, so it's like Thanksmas, right? Like I haven't seen a Thanksgiving thing anywhere, right? Everything is Christmas. I put up an inflatable turkey in my yard because I felt like Thanksgiving needed to be honored, but we moved on to like full-blown Christmas. I'm expecting to see like Easter stuff in the stores by next week. I don't know. It's crazy how far in advance we are. But now we're in November. It's gonna go quick from here. I hope you finished the lecture, the chapter on schizophrenia. So I posted that video. I'm sorry that it wasn't unlocked. If some of you struggled, I forgot to push the visible button. But hopefully all of you finished it. Are there any like lingering questions? We got through most of it. It was just the causes and treatment. But rather than fall behind, I posted that video for you. Any like lingering thoughts or questions, comments, anything related to schizophrenia before we move forward? Oh, sorry, I left them up. I left my kids up. All right, I'll go back to our slides here. But anything from chapter 12 before we go to chapter 13? If you didn't watch the rest of the lecture, I did post it on Canvas, so make sure that you finish that up. It wasn't a lot if you skip to where we left off. But what we'll do is we'll move to chapter 13. And this chapter should be really helpful for a lot of you. a lot of your characters from your shows, a lot of you suspect personality disorders. So hopefully this will help with that. We'll look at all 10 of them. There are 10 and look at some of like the defining characteristics, a couple of like clips along the way to try and like highlight them as we go. But these are a very controversial group of disorders because in essence, what we're saying is that your personality is the disorder. And I think that makes it really difficult for a lot of people to accept. So these aren't universally accepted, but we will talk about them. They are definitely in the DSM and everything. Every single one of us has a personality. Okay. Hopefully you just have one. If you have more than one, then you have dissociative identity disorder, right? Which we talked about previously, but one personality, everything that makes you who you are. The things that you like and don't like, the experiences that you've had, your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, everything encompasses your personality. And you all are very different from each other, right? You're different from the person sitting next to you and every other person in this world. We're all unique and different. And it's this enduring long-term pattern that starts when we're very young and tends to be pretty consistent and stable across our lifetime. Our personalities don't tend to change a whole lot. They might shift a little, but they're thought to be very enduring, right? And very like starting very, very early on. Now, big life experiences can obviously shift them, but we each have a personality. We are able to like adapt and be flexible. We have different ways of responding, different parts of our personality might come out around other people. But personality disorders are when people have very like inflexible and maladaptive, very like rigid ways of thinking, behaving, and reacting that tend to persist regardless of the circumstance and situation. They tend to cause problems because people tend to respond always in very similar ways that are somewhat like, again, maladaptive, right? They're distressful and they cause some of those Ds that we've talked about. And when we look at these personality disorders, they tend to fall into 3 clusters. There are disorders that are characterized by being kind of like odd or eccentric or kind of like just atypical in a way, kind of standing out. There are disorders that are marked by like drama, being dramatic, very high emotions. And then there are ones that are marked by anxiety. All right, and so we'll look at all of these, and your book has this little like chart in it. But the odd and eccentric ones, we have 3. Paranoid, schizoid, and schizotypal. The anxious, fearful, we have avoidant, dependent, and obsessive compulsive. As a side note, this is my favorite. When we get there, I have stories. Obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And then the dramatic ones, we have histrionic, narcissistic, antisocial, and borderline. So 10 different ones, and we'll go through each one. And just know there's a lot of overlap, especially within categories. Right? There's a lot of overlap. These are very commonly misdiagnosed. And again, they're a little bit controversial. So we'll go through all of them and kind of giving you the highlights of each one. But most of us don't have personality disorders. We just have personality, and personality can vary. And as a side note, typically people can only have one personality disorder. So if you have a character in your film and you can't decide between 2, we usually only diagnose one. Right. And so if you don't meet the criteria of any of these neatly, then maybe it's not the perfect diagnosis. Right. So usually just one of these because we only have one personality, if that makes sense. So let's start with the ones that are considered odd. Okay. The odd personality disorders. So people who have like odd or eccentric behaviors, things that are kind of atypical. People who have one of these tend to be kind of socially isolated or maybe even lonely, right? Their odd behavior tends to kind of keep them isolated from other people. So as we go through these, I'll write like a couple of key words for each one of them, or like a handful of keywords. So the first one up here is paranoid. So paranoid personality disorder, right? One of the most common, like odd personality disorders. People who have this are very like suspicious and mistrustful of other people. So some words we can write up here. We could write suspicious. There's a lot of mistrust. So you don't trust other people. You constantly think that they have like a hidden agenda. There's a lot of doubting loyalty of people. You could say unjustified doubts about loyalty. So you're kind of constantly suspicious of other people. You think they're out to get you. You think they have like your like worst interests in mind. There's a lot of like looking for hidden meanings of things. So a lot of like conspiracy theories and like anxiety and like a lot of like odd behaviors to protect yourself or shield yourself from like being listened to or watched or whatever you think might be going on. You think that people are trying to hurt you or harm you in some way or like trick you might be more common thing, that everyone kind of means you harm. And so oftentimes people who have paranoid personality disorder, they don't get close to other people because they don't trust them, right? They think that they're out to get them in some way. Now, this might remind you a little bit of like paranoid schizophrenia. There's a lot of like schizophrenia-like stuff going on in this cluster, right? We even have like schizoid, schizotypal. They sound like schizophrenia. With paranoid personality, it's generally less intense than paranoid schizophrenia, but more global. So this might be somebody who's like never trusted people, who's always kind of like looking for hidden meanings and things, versus someone who has paranoid schizophrenia might be more like hallucinating and delusions, like more intense, but more specific. So with this person, it starts very young in life. All of these tend to start very young in life, and then they escalate. And typically we don't diagnose them until somebody is an adult, like 18 or older. So with this one, I have a clip to play from you. It's from an older movie called Conspiracy Theory. And what you'll see in this clip, and he mumbles, so I'm sorry for that. A lot of what he's saying is just kind of gibberish anyway. But you'll see him being very paranoid about people breaking in. He locks up his food, right? He's looking for like conspiracies in newspapers. So very like paranoid behavior, which is the defining characteristic of this disorder. Let me play that for you. It's a good movie. Yeah, it's an older movie, but a good movie. Like he doesn't go into his apartment like through the main way. He goes up the back stairs, counts the stairs so he would know how long it would take. You see all the locks on his door. That's very common, like not one lock, but multiple locks, along with like a little like setup so that if somebody did break in, the bottle would have fallen over and he would know that. His food is locked up, right? Might be practical if you have roommates, right? Can't steal your ice cream that way, but like it's definitely complicated. But then you see him smack a bug with a spatula and hang it back up. Like germs, not his issue, right? But paranoia is his thing, right? And then looking through newspapers, looking for connections between things like why is the shuttle launch here? Why is the president visiting Turkey? What are the connections and hidden meanings that are there? That's very, very common with this disorder, kind of reading into everything and having that paranoia that people are out to get you. Did you have a thought of
the bottle thing?
Yeah. Yeah, very common to set up like elaborate traps or things so you would know if somebody had broken in. You would know if somebody disturbed the door in some way because the bottle would have been knocked over. So again, kind of a more pervasive pattern of paranoia, but not as severe as someone who had like paranoid schizophrenia, for example. Any like questions or stories or thoughts or anything about this one? Yeah.
As he was like mumbling to himself.
Yeah.
So as my son was going through his process, sometimes I would see that,
Yeah.
actually, put in there that he's talking to himself. And after a while, I realized I do.
Yeah.
It was just learned.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of like going through things going, okay, and next we'll do like.
I do that too. I think a lot of people talk to themselves. I see a lot of people like nodding. I feel like I talked to myself more during COVID than I did before COVID, but I don't know if that's like a, cultural thing. But a lot of people do talk to themselves like that. But it's the things you're saying that are more interesting than anything, right? But yeah, it's pretty common, I think, even more so now than it used to be. So. Anything else here? Any other questions, stories, comments, thoughts, anything for paranoid? Okay, schizoid is the next one. Sounds kind of like schizophrenia. Schizophrenia-like. So with this one, we see a lot of like very little social expression, not a lot of emotional expression either, very solitary. This person or somebody with this tends to be a very solitary person. They avoid social relationships by choice. Right? Tending to not wanting to be around other people. There's a lot of emotional coldness. So very little expression of emotion. This is like a lot of the negative symptoms of schizophrenia, right? The flat affect, and not a lot of emotion, not a lot of energy or like volition, if you will. There's a very restricted range of emotion. So very little emotion, restricted emotion, avoiding relationships. It's awkward to be around other people because you don't tend to talk a lot or do a lot or want to be around others. Very cold and distant and kind of unfeeling. See that this individual tends to not marry or have a lot of relationships. Really good example of this would be like Bruce Wayne, like Batman in the newer Batman movies. Like he's kind of like odd. Like he's got some odd eccentric stuff, very like cold, doesn't have a lot of people he's close to, one or two, tend to work in jobs that don't require you to work with others and allow you to be alone more of the time. This person can be like lonely, but it's usually that they avoid relationships by choice. They don't want to be around other people. Versus it's a little different with the last one here. So schizoid is a lot of the like negative symptoms of schizophrenia, but on a lesser level. Again, not a lot of emotion or volition or like emotions. And then they don't tend to be around other people, just not a lot of warm feelings toward others. So they tend to be very solitary by choice. Yeah.
Does schizophrenia still have certain relationships with like family members that
You might. Yeah, like it might be one or two people, like a couple of people, like Batman, like or Bruce Wayne has a close relationship with like Alfred, right? And then so it might be that you have a couple of people, but not a lot, right? And so it'd be fine to have like one or two, especially like family, but tend to not like get married or have a lot of friends in any way, just because they don't have a lot of emotional expression, which makes social stuff awkward. Schizotypal. Schizotypal is a really interesting one. Here's where we get a lot of like delusions and kind of odd eccentric behavior. So with this one, you get like odd and peculiar behavior. Like it might be like strange dress or strange ideas that people have with this. There's a lot of like paranoia that can come into it. It can't be the defining characteristic or would be up here, but like a lot of paranoia or having like odd beliefs. There's like perceptual distortions. Like odd or magical thinking. So it might be that people have some like really odd perceptions about the world around them. Let me tell you a story about somebody that I knew that I would bet anything as a psychologist now had schizotypal personality disorders. So when I was in high school, I had some very odd friends. I gave my parents probably a heart attack several times with the people that I surrounded myself with. One of them believed herself to be half human, half dragon. Okay? I would bet anything that she has this, right? No idea where this person is now. I wish. I tried so hard like 2 years ago to find this individual, could not. Probably because they legally changed their name when they turned 18 to their dragon name. And I have no idea what that is, right? So that would make it difficult. But this person that I knew, very odd individual, right? Like she would wear all black to school and trench coats and knee pads and elbow pads to school in high school every day. Enough so that everybody called her knee pads, right? Because she wore knee pads to school. And then this was around the time of like Columbine and there was some school shootings. So when trench coats got banned, she would wear a black sheet as a cape because it was not in the dress code and that was allowed, right? Stood out. This is the kind of person who when they walk by you, you do a double take, would stand out. Terrifying as well. Had like a multiple degree black belt in karate. So very good that I was on this individual's good side. I was never afraid of this person. I was very untouchable with this person as a friend because everyone was terrified of her. I was fascinated, right? So she thought she was half human, half dragon. Her human side was female, her dragon side was male, right? So just to complicate it further, she would walk around the school and stop randomly and go like this to sprout her dragon wings. I never saw dragon wings, but I waited every time. You never know, right? She would flick people with her imaginary dragon tail, believe that the world was going to end, that there were all these prophecies. That's kind of like the magical thinking piece of it. Really, really interesting person. Also came from a household that had a lot of abuse and violence. And so, like, in my mind now, looking back on this, would very much like hypothesize this. Again, at 18, changed her legal name to her dragon name, her male dragon name. No idea what that is, but really, really interesting individual. That's very common with this disorder, that like perceptual like distortions of like thinking the world's going to end, and there's like magical stuff, the dragon identity, that kind of odd magical thinking. I have a less intense example that I think also fits really, really well. Luna Lovegood from the Harry Potter books and movies is another really good example. Just a little like odd, like stands out, is kind of weird, and you're not sure like where that line is. Let me play. I have a like short example of that, which might make you want to watch the Harry Potter movies. Very common with schizotypal disorder. It's a lot of the like odd behaviors that you might see with schizophrenia, but on a lesser level, right? So again, like odd dress, odd beliefs about the world, thinking you're half dragon would be a good example of that, or like some of her beliefs like she had, and like everyone kind of has a little bit of a standoffish approach. That person tends to oftentimes be intensely lonely. They want relationships, but their odd behavior makes it difficult to have relationships. So they tend to have a lot of discomfort with other people, but they want to be close to other people, which can again make things very difficult and very lonely for that person. Okay, so all of these are dominated by like odd, eccentric, kind of peculiar behavior or beliefs, kind of lack of emotions or lack of expression, and paranoia, right? All of these would fall under the same cluster of odd or eccentric personality disorders. Any other thoughts or stories, questions, comments, anything here? Yeah.
You know. Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a friend whose son was at the same residential as my son, and they had the same diagnosis. He had a little extra things like autism and OCD. But you know, one day she texted me, you know, Thomas is telling me that Pillar's been following him around all weekend.
Yeah.
In the condo. and you know, like that could make you feel subconscious about not being around people.
Sure.
I mean, it just overlaps so much.
They do. A lot, right? And then with schizophrenia too, which they like even share name elements with here, right? And it makes it really hard because somebody, you know, could be showing some of these things, and depending on what comes forward in a therapy session, they could get the wrong diagnosis very easily. Two people who have the same disorder can look very different. There's a lot of issues with these disorders. And like it could, some of it on a lesser level, just be personality. Like a lot of people have little elements of those things, you know, on like a much lesser level. Like my daughter Paisley, you know, she like will run around and pretend to be a dragon. I was like, what is it with me and dragon people? Like, what's happening? But she loves dragons. She's 9, so I'm not worried about it, you know. But like that at like 18 looks very different, right? So, yeah, right. Right, could kind of prompt some of these things as well. And a lot of these have roots in like childhood issues. It's not uncommon to see, sadly. Anything else for the moment with these? If we go to the next cluster. Yeah, sorry, I didn't see. It's tricky. So by definition, your personality is something that's enduring. Okay, so you can learn to live with these and temper them, but they don't tend to go away because it's who you are, which is what makes them so hard to treat, right? It's like you have to change who you are. But a lot of people can learn to like tone this stuff down or hide it, or like find people who accept it in a way. And so it's more that you learn to manage it then they go away. I won't say it can't go away, but it can go to the point where like maybe it's not noticeable unless somebody knows you quite well. And that's probably the most likely outcome. All right. Next group. The dramatic personality disorders. There are 4 in this one, starting with antisocial personality disorder. Common name for this? Anyone know what the common name for antisocial personality disorder would be? Yeah. Close, really close. Yeah.
Sociopath?
Sociopath, or there's one more. Psychopath, right? I heard it right. Sociopath or psychopath. Well, psychotic, you were kind of along that line, right? The sociopath, psychopath. Psychotic was losing contact with reality, right? So close. So if somebody is a sociopath or a psychopath, the diagnostic name for that is antisocial personality disorder. So the thought is that a sociopath or a psychopath more refers to the causes or root of the disorder. It's more of like a descriptor, like a common descriptor, just like you might use Munchausen's to describe factitious disorder, right? So the technical name is this, and this is probably one of the more difficult and dangerous of the personality disorders. These 2 up here are the most severe of all of them, really. So with antisocial personality disorder, you get a bunch of different things. There's a lack of remorse or guilt. This is probably the defining characteristic of this disorder. This individual oftentimes does not feel any guilt or remorse, doesn't feel bad about hurting or harming or manipulating or tricking another individual. That's a huge red flag. If you think back to those case studies we did on like day 2, there was that guy, I think it was Andrew, who had no guilt about his behavior, right? Big red flag for this disorder. There's a lot of lying, conning, and deceit. Tricking people, manipulating people, lying about things. Long cons are very common with this. A lot of like criminal like behavior. There's a failure to respect the law. And I'm going to add that this person is often very charming, at least in a superficial way. On the surface, you might not notice a lot of this. Oftentimes, this person has a lot of charm and charisma, but are very ruthless underneath. Hannibal Lecter, great example, charming, intelligent, very charismatic, brutally ruthless murderer underneath all of that. Alex from A Clockwork Orange, another great example of this. There are so many. The Joker is another one. Dexter, a whole show about him having antisocial personality disorder. Oftentimes people, again, charming, charismatic on a surface level, but they're much more ruthless and underneath. Yeah.
As a child.
Yeah, so technically, in order to be diagnosed with this, you have to be 18 and you have to have had a diagnosis of conduct disorder or oppositional defiant disorder previously. So when somebody's younger, they might have a definition, or I'm sorry, disorder diagnosis of like oppositional defiant or conduct disorder, which is a child who isn't listening to like authority figures. They're getting into trouble, maybe they're bullying. Huge red flag is like harming or doing stuff to animals, being violent to animals. So you see those behaviors in a child, but you technically can't diagnose it until they're 18. So I always want to say like Joffrey from Game of Thrones is like the best example of this, but he's not 18, so technically he couldn't have it, but you could be on the path to it with a diagnosis of one of those 2 things when you're younger. And it's actually a criteria that you have to show signs of this from a young age in order to be diagnosed. There's also a huge lack of empathy that people with this disorder have. They're not able to put themselves into somebody else's shoes or somebody else's position. And so what that often means is they don't understand what other people are feeling, or at least not on like a genuine level. Often get in trouble with the law for violent, criminal, or unethical behavior. Not always, but it's very common to see that they often will blame society or even their victims for the things that they do. There's a lot of law breaking and like failing to conform to like lawful norms of behavior. Yeah.
They want like a murder.
Yeah.
Then say they did like they looked at like animal testing or like a butcher or something like that, then could that spark them to then become like a murderer. Because if they don't like have the empathy and they start assimilating them to killing them.
Sure.
Then could that.
Like be a path toward it, sure, and it doesn't, you don't have to be violent to have this. Like, it could be that you're more manipulative and deceptive and like lying and cheating and conning, rather than violent. But people do show a lot of violence with this, because it's almost like that slippery slope of like, yeah, I don't mind doing this, I don't feel bad about it, and then you almost just like kind of escalate from there. I'm watching the Fall of the House of Usher. I don't know if any of you have seen that. It's so good, by the way. It's like a random side note on Netflix. And like some of these people are very wealthy, and it's just that like I can't empathize with any of you. I'm above you. I'm above the law. I don't feel bad about like harming people to earn money from like pharmaceuticals. So it doesn't have to be violence, but it can be part of it. It could escalate that way for sure. As I said, a lot of examples of this in the media. I don't know how many of you saw Dexter when that was a show, and then they had the little reboot of it later. He wasn't as much of a like fitting this in the like second release of it, but in the original, he was very much this way. And there's a lot of lack of empathy. I found a like little montage somebody put together of showing that lack of empathy. And I think that's a very commonly overlooked element of this disorder. So I want to play that for you. It's just a couple of minutes, but you can see he struggles like he understands and has empathy, but it's that very superficial like element to it of not genuinely feeling that way. And again, this can be very violent, or it could be more just like unethical and lying and cheating and conning. But there's a lot of examples of this in the media. Very dangerous to others. This person oftentimes harms other people emotionally or physically, and then doesn't feel bad about it. And that's a very common element of this disorder. Any other thoughts or comments or anything about antisocial? Yeah. And then we'll come on. Yeah, go ahead, Jen. Yeah.
I've been studying narcissistic personality disorder.
Which we'll get to. Yeah.
So yeah, my therapist always says it's like a spectrum.
Yeah.
And like the antisocial personality.
Yeah. Yeah. And narcissistic personality disorder is in the same category, right? Same cluster. And so they do tend to have that lack of empathy in common, that like, I'm important and I'm not on your level in common, right? There's some elements in common between the two, and you could view them as different ends of a spectrum. It's interesting. It's very interesting. Yeah. You had a thought too.
I was going to say, when I was in high school, when I was a senior, I had to do a like senior project.
Yeah.
And I was certifying in humanities, specifically Psych, and I did my project on Peter Pan.
Okay.
He had antisocial.
Interesting.
And I did like this whole thing because I had done the play at school.
Okay.
And so like I was this whole thing, and I always brought it back to like, and he feels no remorse. He doesn't feel bad. Like he hurts Wendy's feelings and doesn't feel bad because it's all about what he wants.
Interesting.
And like it was just a very interesting project to do because I had to pull like a lot of resources for it.
Yeah.
And like use the DSM, and it was very interesting, and my teacher helped me with it and stuff. And it was just it's very interesting because it's like, I'd never thought about it this way before.
It's fun to take a character that's like well known and look at them in a very different way, right?
Yeah.
And I've had some people for the paper, right? Like, I mean, I shared with you that somebody diagnosed Harry Potter with schizophrenia, like that he made the whole thing up. He had delusions of grandeur because he was abused and lived under the stairs. Or like Ariel was a hoarder, you know, like taking like common characters and like looking at them in a different way is fun, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting to do. I love it. Anybody else? Any other thoughts here? Okay, so antisocial is most dangerous to others. Borderline, most dangerous to self. Okay, so borderline personality is the next one. Interesting name, borderline, like borderline personality disorder. And the reason for that is it used to be thought that this person was on the border between being neurotic and psychotic. Now, we don't use those words too much anymore. Neurotic would mean you can't control your emotions. Psychotic, you're not in touch with reality. And so this person was on the border of the two, hence the name borderline personality disorder. Sometimes also goes by the name emotionally unstable. I can write that here. Emotionally unstable personality disorder. But borderline or BPD is kind of the main name for this. Very dramatic, difficult disorder. right? This disorder has a lot of dangerous elements to self. Very high correlation with like suicidality, self-harming like behaviors are very common with this disorder. There's a lot of symptoms going on. Feelings of emptiness are very common. Chronic emptiness. I'm alone, I'm empty, there's like nothing to me, feeling hollow is very common with this. There's a lot of suicidality or suicidal gestures, like self-harming. It's pretty common. Oftentimes people who cut themselves or harm themselves in some way have elements of this disorder. Other things we could say, there's a lot of like reactivity of mood. Mood is very all over the place, right? So we sometimes talk about something called splitting being common with this, where people are incredibly black and white, right? So you view things all one way or all the other. People are good or they're bad. There's no gray in the middle. You love someone, they're perfect or they're awful and you don't care about them. That's just kind of black and white thinking. There's a very prevalent book with this called I Hate You, Don't Leave Me. And I think that sums up this disorder really well. It's a lot of like push and pull, right? Like back and forth, black and white, a lot of being very reactive with your mood. That's something that we see quite a bit of. There's also a lot of instability and impulsivity. This disorder. Okay, so we see a lot of like problems with like identity and like impulsive, reckless behaviors. Very commonly confused with a manic episode and bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder oftentimes get a little bit jumbled, right? They can appear somewhat similar, though this is much more longer term, much longer lasting. Interesting too, if you remember back to the unit on stress and trauma disorders, we talked about complex PTSD a little bit. It's very common that people who have borderline personality disorder suffered childhood trauma. And what we're noticing is that a lot of people that we diagnosed with borderline personality disorder actually more have like complex post-traumatic stress disorder or like developmental trauma that fits them better. Really strong correlation between how the two can appear. I found a little like YouTube video that like talks about the symptoms of this a little bit more. I think it's helpful, even if it's not the most exciting. I'll play it for you and then we'll come back to this slide. But this is definitely, as I mentioned, and I forgot to write the fear of abandonment up here. That's also a really huge part of this. And so oftentimes the mood swings with this make relationships so difficult. It's like you are perfect. You're everything I could have ever wanted. I can't even breathe when I'm around you. I love you so much because you're so perfect. And then they don't pick up their phone or they don't text you back or they do something really small and I hate you. How was I ever with you? Like, you're like awful. I've never cared about you. I'm leaving you. And then when you leave and that person is like, fine, I don't love you either. And they leave, you freak out because they've abandoned you. I love you. You're perfect. Please come back. I'm so sorry. It's this very like cyclical thing that can happen. And that's where the I hate you, don't leave me comes from. And so this can be very difficult in emotional connections with another person because they have this like reactivity of mood that is so severe. And so oftentimes this individual can be intensely lonely because they struggle in relationships. It's hard to be in a relationship with someone who like views you one way one minute and another way another. That splitting can be so difficult to navigate. And so there is a very specific type of therapy for this. It's the only one that I put up here uniquely, called DBT. So you can have DBT for your BPD, right? Like a dialectical behavioral therapy, right? Where you are learning to respond more effectively. So it's like this whole chain of things where like if you have an emotional reaction to something, you're supposed to stop and back up and check the facts and try and look at the thing that happened from a different perspective before you react to the people in your life and push them away and then freak out when they go away from you. So this one can be challenging, especially in relationships. Again, very commonly confused with CPTSD and developmental trauma, as there's often a traumatic element that comes with this, that somebody experienced trauma early in life, and very commonly confused with bipolar disorder as well. Any like stories or comments or thoughts? Yeah, I saw you nodding a lot. Yeah. Sure.
Years ago, she had like confessing that you like like she had about her friend group.
Okay.
We have like a gay male friend, and she was like, "I sometimes think like he's just secretly in love, but he's like a gay male, and she's like a woman."
Okay.
And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Uh-huh.
Or she'll be like, "Oh, I thought this friend was like out to get me for like this amount of time," and I was like, "Oh my god, like you felt this way about us, like for real?" And she's like, "Yeah, but like I know they're not real, but like sometimes they just like come out of nowhere." I was like,
Sure.
"Oh wow!" Like
Yeah.
I was like,
They're like,
absorbing them,
oh
I'm
wow,
like,
steps backwards. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
You wouldn't think about it, because she goes to therapy, so she's kind of aware about these things.
Right.
But then when she like brought them almost out,
Yeah, and there's a lot of what's called checking the facts with this disorder and with dialectical behavioral therapy. Like, okay, what are some of the facts that would make you think that this man who identifies as gay is actually in love with you?
yeah,
Or that I'm actually out to hurt you in some way, right? And like the hard part is often there aren't any facts, but even without the facts, they still feel them.
yeah.
Right. And so there's a lot of that, like can be some of that like paranoia that comes into it, right? It can be challenging, right? So good for you for trying to have the patience. Right? Yeah.
Every time I hear about this disorder, I'm always like, that sounds like me. I don't think that I have it, but I just like relate to so many of the things
Yeah.
so much. But anyways, what I wanted to bring up was, is this one of the things that like, you can't get diagnosed to you're older? Because I had a friend who told me she got diagnosed with it,
Yeah.
but I'm pretty sure she was only like 15 at the time.
Yeah.
And so I was confused by that.
Yeah, and it's a great question, right? And again, just as a reassurance, right? Almost all of us have elements of every disorder. That sounds a little bit like you, it probably sounds a little bit like every, right? But I mean, but it does exist on a spectrum, so that's always possible. It shouldn't be diagnosed until you're out of your teen years. So the teen years, by definition, are a lot of instability and impulsivity and trying to figure out your identity, which are all like core elements of like like an unstable self-image, right? Instability in that. So it is diagnosed in people when they're teenagers. It's frowned upon, right? So it really should be something that is, you wait until someone is older, like at least 18, 19. I won't say it never happens. I have seen it diagnosed in people who are much younger. But it should, it should be something that is real. Because our teenage years are marked by a lot of the things that are hallmarks of this disorder. But the thought is that like sometimes it's very obvious and severe and that it needs a diagnosis to be treated, which might drive why someone would diagnose it earlier. Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of like.
Right. Yeah. It's the like gray middle ground, right? Of like you are showing warning signs of this and behaviors and traits of this, but we're not going to diagnose you with the disorder, yet. We'll see what happens. And that's one direction that we go a lot, right? You are on the path to or show risk factors of, but we're not going to diagnose you with it because then it's a label that stays with it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a lot of trouble with relationships.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting with a file, like it's really more things.
Sure.
It's just like with her, it was really hard to follow that, and then the big relationship.
Yeah, the relationship piece is a big part of it, right? And like it's that like I'm gonna cling to you for dear life, and then please don't ever leave me. Abandonment piece. There's a lot of fear of being left, and it comes often from being left when you were younger. Like you said, like their dad like left when they were younger, right? Lost their dad, like that. It could be a divorce. It could be that they moved out. It could be that they passed, right? That's very common with this disorder, that someone is left at a young age in some capacity. And so then it translates to this fear of abandonment and kind of intense connections with others when they're older. There was another, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But people showed a lot of these things.
Really?
And he really focused on his addiction
Mhm.
and, but what's under that?
Right.
And so he spent $7 million on treatment, and I think was in, maybe 65.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Addiction is really common with this because people are trying to fill the emptiness, right? They feel empty and hollow, so they use substances or food or purchases, like very common for people, like you said, spending the life savings, right? Like buying things to try and make yourself happy. And it might work for a short time, but then you have to buy more and then you're in trouble because you've purchased things that you didn't have the money for, or, or you turn to substances to try and feel differently. And then it leads to addiction, right? Very common, sadly. Yeah. Yeah.
Emotions and connections with people, but then
Sure.
not, broken over it.
It's a challenging one and it's very stigmatized, like
Right.
even more so than like bipolar disorder. This
Yes,
is viewed very negatively in like, in our society.
Treatment, he probably will diagnose if he does have it.
Sure.
Which of course, in his position,
Hmm.
to out there to stand up for that, but.
Yeah.
Standing up. Addiction.
Yeah. Did you have a thought too?
Yeah, what the treatment for this disorder, like maybe restructuring someone's life to get them like distracted from the emptiness.
It could be. Right. How do you find meaning and to feel full?
You say, oh, there's a local YMCA soccer team.
Mhm.
Be a part of that, have that feeling before.
Yeah.
Your priorities list so that you're not so. I guess you could say like focus on the emptiness.
Sure.
Of your life. If you say, oh, well, like things might not be going good for me, but we always got a game on Sunday night.
Yeah. The hard part with this is there's it's kind of beyond what we're talking about, but there's something called a lack of object constancy that tends to happen in people who have borderline personality disorder and CPTSD, where it doesn't fill the hole for long, right? And so the problem is they get involved in soccer, or they go buy stuff, or they find the meaning in things, but it doesn't last. And so then you have to go try and find something else. You're constantly trying to fill the hole that was caused when you were younger, and nothing from now fills the hole from then, if that makes sense. And so it can be really challenging, but that's a big part of it, is how can we encourage you to be present and mindful and do things that make you feel full, and then try to hold on to that fullness when like you feel empty. It's challenging for people. It can be a tough one for sure. But yeah, that might be a big part of it. Let's get you involved. Let's get you out there. Let's look at better ways to respond. Right. A lot of journaling. Like I want you to vent all that like extreme anger. And then when you calm down, then you can talk to your partner about what you're upset about. And you're more grounded in reality at that point, hopefully. Girl Interrupted. If any of you have read the book or seen the movie, great example of this, probably the best one. Hard to play a clip related to it, but the main character played by Winona Ryder, a lot of like this present in that. And then Angelina Jolie's character has antisocial personality disorder. So you get like a 2-for-1 in that movie or book. Really interesting book and movie. A little bit older, but definitely relevant. 2 more in this category. Histrionic and narcissistic, very similar. Talked about both of them. Let me erase this here. A lot of overlap between these two, but a couple of differences. Histrionic. Histrionic sounds a little bit like hysteria, hysterical. There's a lot of dramatic emotional displays with someone who is histrionic, who has histrionic personality disorder. They tend to be very dramatic, suggestible. They have a lot of like emotional displays, but they're very shallow. So it's like shallow emotional displays. They oftentimes show a lot of like seductive kind of behaviors. Very like flirtatious and seductive, like very common. What you see with this is an individual who typically needs to be the center of attention. They need to be in the spotlight. They want all attention on them, very dramatic, but everything that they're being dramatic about is very like shallow. So they might like be very emotional, but it passes very quickly because it's a very shallow level of emotion. Wanting to always kind of be on stage, a lot of like seductive, provocative kind of behaviors. Like I want to prove that I could have you, but then I don't really want you, right? It's that like I want to make sure that I could be the center of your world if I wanted to be, but I don't want to be. So I'm going to move on. There's a lot of that, a lot of like rapid shifting behaviors, attention seeking behaviors are very common. I always think my mother-in-law teeters on histrionic personality disorder. She can take 40 minutes to tell the dramatic tale of a stop sign. Like just making it like so sweepingly dramatic. And I'm like, just get to the point, mom. Like what? You know, like just everything is like this. Everything's the end of the world. Every time we go out to eat, she flirts with the waiter or waitress, doesn't matter how old or young or what their sex is or whatnot, has to prove that like she could like get their attention if she wanted to. I'm like, they're like in their late teens and you're in your 70s. What are you doing? And then my father-in-law jumps in, he tries to flirt too, and it becomes a competition. It's very entertaining all the time. But there's a lot of that like dramatic, shallow emotionality. Narcissistic personality disorder has some elements in common with this, but it's more that this individual has like a big head, right? Like I have this person with like a big head down here. So narcissistic, very similar. We spelled this wrong. Too many S's. Narcissistic. There we go. So with narcissistic personality disorder, that comes with this, right? It's that like I am very important and like nobody could possibly like be at the same level as me. It's very common to feel that way. A lot of like preoccupation with success and beauty and power that comes with this. I have a wonderful example of this that I'd like to play for you. So let me pause. Narcissistic personality disorder, right? There's often a lot of like vanity, like you see him checking the mirror and preoccupied with like how he looks and like, you know, let me tell you about your dreams. They're my dreams, right? Like, of course, right? Like very like classic character, like struggling, with narcissistic personality disorder. Very big-headed, just exaggerated self-importance, very arrogant, lack of empathy for other people, which sometimes can be confused with antisocial personality disorder. It's that same like I'm important and grand and like I could never understand your sad little position that you're in, right? A little bit different in the way that it presents, but you see that same kind of element, which is why they're in the same category of these personality disorders. So these are the four like dramatic ones, right? And again, these two are by far the most dangerous to others and to self. And then we get these two, which are very similar, but the difference is this one tends to be much more dramatic and shallow versus this one tends to have that like grandiosity and entitlement and that self-importance piece to it. Thoughts or stories, questions, comments? Yeah.
They would really sort of themselves.
Sure.
I know someone who, when you said that, I'm like, that sounds exactly like this person I know. But they're also very insecure about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think that's it.
Yeah. Alfred Adler talked a lot about insecurity. Sometimes comes across as superiority, right? And so sometimes when we feel really insecure about ourselves, we overcompensate, right? It's like the guy who drives the massive truck, right? Like, you know, like you're overcompensating for what, right? Like that's a very common like element. And like Adler would have talked a lot about that with this one, that people might overcompensate for that insecurity by projecting this emotionality and projecting this like seductive kind of flirtatious behavior, but behind it is a lot of insecurity and fear, right? So that's very common. Yeah.
A narcissistic personality, also a love bomb.
Yeah, right. You could get that too. Yeah.
Doing everything he could to be who she wanted him to. Oh, got her.
Yeah, and then once he gets her, it might be like, oh, I don't actually want you anymore. I proved I could have you and now I'm moving on, right? Yeah, you might get some of that like love bombing as part of that as well. All right, we will pick up with this on Wednesday. We'll go through the last group and then go from there. Have a wonderful rest of the day. I'll see you on Wednesday. Oh, I forgot to pass it around. Sorry about that. So you're